This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
Yeah, it's a big game. Obviously, like you said, not sure, where it's going to end up. But if we do end up playing them, it's a big game, and points are still available. So we have to go out there and have a good full 60.
It's game 80, whatever it was tonight, and your Cooch, he showed a lot of emotion when he scored, and I think the guys were, they know what's at stake for him as well. So I think, you get down to this time of year, and it's all about the team, but there's some individual accomplishments that can go down, and so. Much like, guys were really excited for Cooch, that also carried on for, Lilleberg later in the game. So it was great to see. But, I think guys also, you're right, fed off the emotion of Cooch.
They fed off the emotion. Will there be a lot of emotion tonight? The Rangers beat the Panthers.
I know.
Yesterday.
We spelled all that out on yesterday's show. And I was projecting, maybe the fans didn't feel this way, but I was projecting that the fans would be saying, there's no way the Rangers are going to beat the Panthers in regulation. You never know. We talk about sloppy play. I actually watched the game-winning goal scored by Trocheck shorthanded in the third period. The Panthers were so sloppy in their own zone. Like, it was a nothing play on the original entry. Trocheck had it. The Panthers are back defensively. It's killing time. Loses the puck. And the Panthers were so sloppy clearing the zone. They just handed it right back to the Rangers, and it turned into not quite a 2-on-1, but Trocheck is open at the left circle. Cross-ice pass. He has an open net. Shoots it in. It happens to every team. Does that mean the Panthers aren't a good defensive team? They're one of the top defensive teams in the NHL. They've gotten better in the second half. I remember at halfway point, I was looking at their numbers, and they're like, not particularly strong, particularly after last year when they tied for first in goals allowed per game. They're not quite there this year, but they're a top 10 defensive team. But they were kind of loosey-goosey last night. It happens. So the Lightning have clinched second. They still have a chance at first.
Right.
It is a slim, narrow path to first. They're going to need to win their last two games. One of those has to be in regulation, and the Leafs are going to have to get no points in their last two games. Otherwise, we got Lightning Panthers with the Lightning having home ice.
And the Leafs take on the Sabres tonight in Buffalo.
At Buffalo, yeah. And then they're home Detroit on Thursday.
So if you're a betting man, and we're not, but if you are, I'd say you're looking at a 2-3 matchup in that first round. And what do these two games mean remaining for the Tampa Bay Lightning? First place.
Well, I think that
is dangling.
They still have a path for first, right?
They do.
So,
they do.
That is a carrot out there. But, John Cooper was asked about resting players, which other teams have done. Look at the Oilers roster last night. They had a chance. It was a slim chance, but they had a chance at getting second. Kind of the same deal with Lightning Panthers. So the Oilers hosted the Kings. The Kings were 2 points up on Edmonton. They're going to meet in the first round. The question is, who's going to have home ice? Yep. And, look at the players that Edmonton didn't play. McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman. They had a whole bunch of guys that didn't play, and maybe they're just resting them. Maybe they're slightly banged up. Lightning, as Coop said, they can't afford to do that just based on their cap situation. They can't rest a bunch of guys. Also, the Lightning play tonight and Thursday. So the schedule demands that, they're going to have games. They're not going to have days off before the playoffs begin this weekend. So they're going to play their regulars. He may even out the minutes more. It does seem like Darren Radish is, should I say probable? He skated this morning in an optional. Rob Zettler, after the practice they had yesterday, basically said he's day-to-day, which is great news. It sounds like Radish is going to be able to play. So if that's the case, I would expect a similar lineup to what we saw from the Lightning against Buffalo. And Luke Glendening was out on the ice today, which is a very good sign.
Yeah, that is a good sign.
Now, he's not going to play, but the fact that he was on the ice in a regular jersey is a positive sign.
Yep, for sure. And Health is probably the biggest thing heading in now. I think I'd be curious to ask our fan base. We're supposed to have George Richards on, maybe coming up here in about 10 minutes. I spoke to him via text. He was cool with coming on, but you just sometimes never know with interviews. But hoping to have him on because we can talk about that load management and what does this mean for the Panthers. But I think I'm curious for Lightning fans out there. Do you feel like that's a win in terms of the Lightning and this first round getting at least home ice advantage to start? If you are going to get the Florida Panthers, and let's just call it what it is, 2-3 to have home ice advantage, do you feel like that is a slight advantage for Tampa Bay heading into that first round? Or are you one that says, you know what, this is just going to be really a crapshoot. Both teams are going to be ready to go, and I don't know if home ice advantage is going to make a difference. I'd be curious to hear what they have to say. Because, look, I think first place would have been nice, and we've talked about that. Look, do you want to stay away from Florida in the first round or Toronto in the first round? Yeah, I think you would. I do. Based off of my options, yeah. Okay, so you don't. If that option's not on the table, is home ice in the first round pretty good?
Well, the players said they wanted it. John Cooper said he wanted it. Cooper said about the advantage of home ice advantage in Coop's mind is Game 7. There is more pressure on the home team at the start of a series if you have home ice advantage, but I don't know. I mean, I've maintained that the Lightning are going to have to play well on the road if they hope to go anywhere in the playoffs. So you can't just assume that they're going to maintain the same excellent record in the playoffs at home that they had during the regular season. And the Panthers have shown they can win in Amalie. They won here earlier this year. So I don't know I don't think you throw it out the window, Greg, but you can't put too much emphasis on the fact that the Lightning got home ice in the first round. They're still going to have to go out and play at an extremely high level.
Of course. It's more of talk show material.
Which we are doing.
Which I'm curious. I think you and I both probably agree that I don't know if the Panthers or the Lightning, I think they understand it's going to be a difficult first round matchup. I don't know if it's going to change the way they play. I agree with you. If there's one round in the playoffs that's maybe a little bit more, I don't want to say difficult, but a little uncertain, is it the first round? Because maybe the officiating's different. Guys are fresher at the first round of the playoffs than they may be in the third or fourth round. Maybe if you believe in those things, it's a little more unpredictable. I think the fact that the Lightning and Panthers have faced each other, have competed in the same division, makes it a little bit more predictable. And I think both teams will be ready to go from the start. I think, what does that look like in the first two games? Is it a split? Or can the Lightning go up 2-0 heading back to Sunrise? I think that's a fair question. And I don't know. We're not going to obviously know the answer to that, but I don't think both teams are going to not be ready to go to start the playoffs.
The Panthers are going to be ready. The Panthers are going to be ready to go. The Panthers have been following the Lightning's footsteps in this 5-year window where the Lightning went deep into the playoffs 3 straight years. The Panthers are like, by deep, I mean getting to the Stanley Cup final. The Panthers are saying, we want to go to the Stanley Cup final 3 straight years. The Lightning won back-to-back. Panthers are like, we want to win back-to-back. The difference is the Lightning lost in the final in year 3. The Panthers lost in the final, basically in their mind, in year 1, and then they won in year 2. They want the 3-year run to conclude with back-to-back cups. That's what they are focused on. They are going to be ready to go. But just because they are ready to go does not mean that they are going to be healthy and necessarily clicking on all cylinders. So I think it's going to be a very interesting, compelling first round matchup because I think the Lightning are better than they were last year, even as they've sustained some injuries here in the final week of the regular season. And the Panthers just have not been as strong during the regular season this year. And I think that they have more concerns about player health going into this playoff year, but George can tell us more about that. I think I had heard, it maybe wasn't from you, or if I heard it from you, you had read it somewhere, that Bennett was going to miss the rest of the regular season. He played last night for them. So he played. But other guys didn't. I mean, including Brad Marchand, who's sitting at 11 100 games one shy. So if he plays tonight, it'll be game 1100. It's a little surprising, unless he's hurt, that he didn't play last night. You'd think he'd want that game 1100 at home.
I thought he's been banged up. I thought he was banged
Maybe
up.
so,
even
but I mean,
before the trade, you know?
So they've had a few guys that have been out, but they've, like, a lot of them have missed one game. So Marchand arrived hurt, but once he returned to the lineup, he had played every game until last night. Luostarinen and Lundell both sat out last night. Don't know if it's injury related or not. Mackie Samoskevich didn't play last night. Just checking who else. I told you about Lundell. Reinhart played, but didn't play the game before. Gotcha. Bennett missed 4, but came back last night. And then Dmitry Kulikov was injured. I think he missed, 12 games? 3, 6, 9, 12. Yeah, and he played last night. So I don't know what we're going to see from Florida in terms of a lineup tonight, except I think we are going to see Vitek Vanacek because Bobrovsky played last night. So how many of these guys are just being rested? How many of these guys are legitimately banged up? Paul Maurice is like, we need to rest them in advance of the start of the playoffs. And how many of them
guys
is
were
just
out
like,
last night?
I want to rest these guys.
Yeah. How many
The
regulars
game
were
has
out
no
last
bearing
night?
for the Panthers at all.
No.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, how many regulars were out last night for the Panthers?
Well, let me go to the actual game,
because
I can tell you who was
kudos to them
scratched
for being able to do that.
Yeah. So not in the lineup last night. Marchand, Nico Mikkola, Luostarinen, Lundell, Samoskevich, and then Matt Kiersted is an extra defenseman. But remember Jacob Megna, the Megna brothers? They both played in Nebraska, Omaha with Andre Schuster.
Do I remember?
One of them may have overlapped with Gensel too. It's possible. But Jacob Megna, who's the defenseman. Yeah, Jason was the forward. Jacob Megna has been up. I mean, that's how kind of depleted they are in defense. He's been in their minor league system playing for their AHL team basically all year. He's got 6 or 7 games with the Panthers this year. So he played and he has been in. But Kulikov returned, spelling Mikkola. And then you had Jones, Forsling, Balinskis, who's basically been in all year, and Nate Schmidt. So most of their D-core, I would say, filled with regulars. But, Rasmus Asplund has been mostly down this year. He's been up playing. They picked up Jesse Puljujärvi, the well-traveled Puljujärvi.
I read a quote
the Penguins
from
just released
he's an intriguing guy.
Yeah, the Penguins just released him. And I'm not quite sure how he was just given his release, and the Panthers signed him as a free agent. But that was when they were really, working with a depleted roster. So he played last night, as did Jonah Gadjevich, who's been with them, but he's kind of been in and been out. Then I mentioned Sturm missed some time, but he's back, and he played last night.
I mean, would it be safe to say they have a better cap situation than the Lightning if they're able to kind of move guys in and out? And you wouldn't think that, but you don't need the team.
You don't need a lot of cap space at this point of the year, Greg. It's just the Lightning have so little after adding Gordon Bjorkstrand.
They're the exception, probably. The Lightning, with just how close they are to the cap. But I mean, to be able to sit however many regulars they did, I mean, that to me, that would be a strategy that I would look at. If you're the Florida Panthers and you feel like, look, maybe we've been up and down this year, but we're still in a pretty good spot. Our goal is we're not going to win unless we're healthy, or let's get there.
Yeah.
That's fine.
They have the benefit of Tkachuk actually being on long-term injury.
Well, because
that gave them cap space. Yeah. I'm guessing that's how they're able to do this.
And you don't get any relief. Like Ekblad was suspended, correct?
Correct. I think he still counts against the cap, but if you're putting Matthew Tkachuk in LTIR,
yes.
I mean, he's not coming back for the regular season. So it's the same thing that we had with the Kucherov situation in 2021, the Mark Stone situation for a few years in Vegas, Patrick Kane back in the day when he missed the end of the regular season. You can go over the cap up to the point that player's salary counts.
Right.
So that's how they can add guys, probably. That's my guess. I haven't gone to Puckpedia to look, but they're getting some relief.
Yes.
Because Matthew Tkachuk's been on LTIR because he hasn't played since then.
That'll be the biggest storyline heading into the playoffs for them. When is he playing? What's his health like?
Yeah.
And, being able to deal with Ekblad being out. Because, he's going to miss, 3 games?
First two.
I mean, that's not insignificant, right?
No.
Do we have George Richards? Is he?
George
is
is
he
ready.
sliding in? George.
George, he's getting ready to drive to Tampa, maybe.
I am not. Not for
Okay.
this
Okay.
one, guys. No thanks.
But you're in the car, and we appreciate that.
By the way, Aaron
Yes.
Ekblad, even though he's suspended, that money's off the cap. So had he been, I don't know why. I don't know why the NHL does that. That doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, his money came off. Had he been suspended before the trade deadline and not 2 days after, Florida would have had like $17 million under the cap, something like that, between Tkachuk and Aaron Ekblad. So Florida spent almost all the Tkachuk money up until about $1 million, and then Ekblad got dinged. So
that's
that
how they've
opened
been
up
able to rest,
7.5.
basically rest some guys because they have the room with the Ekblad Tkachuk situation.
Yeah, I think they have like 4 or 5 extras from Charlotte. So we'll see what happens tonight.
Well, we were asking, we were talking about it, the Lightning Panthers. I mean, it feels like that's going to be the matchup in the first round.
Yeah.
George,
yeah.
does home ice
Toronto
matter
needs 1 point, right? Toronto needs 1. Yeah.
For sure. We're I don't know if home ice advantage means much between these two teams, but I'm curious where you sit. Do you think it does in a series that's probably going to be very close?
Well, it hasn't in years past because it hasn't gone 7, right? I mean, you've had, I think the first time was 6, then it was the sweep, then the Panthers in 5. So home ice has not come into factor in this series, but yeah, it could in this one. I mean, if you're Florida, Aaron Ekblad's going to miss those first 2 games. You've got to go to Tampa. You know the old saying, you want to come home with a split, but you come back 0-2 from Tampa and you're on your heels a little bit because Tampa knows how to win in Sunrise. So I think it's going to be a great series. I mean, we've seen some great hockey out of these two teams over the years. We've seen some great performances. Vasilevsky back in 22, Florida couldn't get a thing past him. Last year, the Panthers were able to open things up, and Sergei Bobrovsky, slaying the dragon. They needed to get past Tampa, all that good stuff. So this series has a lot of good storylines, and hopefully Toronto doesn't ruin it, and we get Florida.
We get it.
George, how banged up are the Panthers? I mean, from afar, we're seeing like Verhaeghe misses a game, Bennett misses 4, Forsling misses a game. Like, how significant or any, forgetting the Tkachuk situation and even the Ekblad situation, he's going to have to get back into game shape. As far as the guys who've been in and out, like, what's their status? How healthy are they? How ready are they going to be for the start of the playoffs?
100%. I mean, listen, I think it's Paul Maurice covering himself. Maybe there's some bumps and bruises. Everybody's got that, right? Nobody's 100% at this time of the year. But he likes to tell you how much the Panthers, 9 games, 15 days, 7 games and 11, whatever it is. This is more load management. This is what the NHL doesn't want to say it. The NBA does, but he's just resting guys. That's all this is. Sam Bennett maybe tweaked something. If the Panthers were 2 points out of the playoffs, would he have played? Sure. I'm pretty sure he would have. And he worked he's back now. So yeah, they're healthy now. It all depends on Matthew Tkachuk. We're going to find out. I mean, the big day for the Panthers right now is Thursday. I mean, tonight doesn't mean anything to Florida. I don't know what we're going to see tonight on the ice in Tampa, but Thursday at practice, who's out there? What's going on with Matthew Tkachuk? Is he going to be ready to go? Paul Maurice needs to get him into a couple practices. We haven't seen him other than like one morning skate in Montreal. And a couple times we've seen him out on the ice by himself. Matthew Tkachuk hasn't practiced with the Panthers since February. So, he needs to get in a couple hard workouts before he can come back, and then we'll see.
George, what do you like now that we're 80 games into this, heading into the playoffs? What do you like even more about this Panthers team? And what have you maybe looked at from this Panthers perspective and said, maybe they're a little weaker than I thought at this area?
Yeah, I think the question was, how do you replace Brandon Montour, Oliver Ekman Larsson? Florida feels like they at least did that with the Seth Jones trade. They've gotten some pretty good play from some guys maybe a lot of people don't know of. Uvis Balinskis, 26-year-old from Latvia. Florida signs him out of the Czech league, and now he's playing top pairing minutes with Gus Forsling. So defensively, the Panthers are not as good as last year, especially with Ekblad out, but they're okay, right? I just like Florida's attitude. I think when a lot of fans are going nuts about this resting players, but this is John Cooper. This is the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Panthers just tell us where we're going to be. We're not going to win. We're not going to chase a division championship. If it's there, we'll take it. If home ice is there, we'll take it. But they're not chasing anything. John Cooper, Tampa Bay, that's been their attitude for years. Just tell us where we're playing. Where's game one? We'll be there. And, for years and years, Florida was always, 4 points out of the playoffs with a game in hand, that kind of thing. And now to see them take that next step to where let's just get to the playoffs. This doesn't, let's try and play our best going in, but, we'll be all right. It's a nice change of pace.
Something Greg and I have kicked around over the years relating to the Lightning. I'm going to ask you this question about the Panthers. How are the Panthers playing? It's like, let's get our game in gear heading into the playoffs. So where are they from that standpoint? And how important is that to this team that has the pedigree?
They're playing their style. The results haven't been there. They came off last week a 5-game losing streak. They went 0-4 on the road. They lost in Toronto, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, and Detroit. And that was some of the best defensive hockey the Florida Panthers have played all year. They look like that's how they're going to play in the playoffs. They didn't give away anything. Now they couldn't score, but they were not giving any of those teams. I think that there was a game where Montreal had 3 shots, in the third period. Florida just shut people down. Florida's playing that defensive style of hockey. Even though the results may not be there, Paul Maurice loves it. He's like, guys, we're playing the game the right way. That's all they care about right now. As far as the past couple games, it's been hard to tell because there's been so many absences in the lineup. This is going to be a completely different team come Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whenever this series starts. Especially if you get Tkachuk back, and then we want to see where Brad Marchand's going to play. What line is he going to be on? Looks like Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen, they're going to play together, but who knows? I mean, he puts them with Bennett and Tkachuk. So there are a lot of moving parts here, but this team's going to look completely different when they kick things off Sunday.
You feel like the best team in the East, from what you've seen, is coming out of the Atlantic Division?
Not to it be any, no disrespect towards Washington, but you look at how tight the Atlantic is. You got 5 of the 8 teams are coming from the Atlantic. You got that New Jersey Carolina series. I'll watch it, but Carolina should win that one. There's no easy matchups in the Atlantic. I mean, even Toronto, Ottawa. I think Toronto wins that one in 6. But Ottawa's going to give them some trouble, especially with Brady coming back. So they've got they've got goaltending now, so we'll see what happens there. But I think if it's Florida and Tampa Bay, this might be the Eastern Conference champ might just come out of this first round series.
How tough of a series, you touched on it, how tough of a series is this going to be for Toronto? Because the Leafs were just in Tampa. They were just in Sunrise. Yeah. And what we heard from Toronto was like, it's really important for Toronto to win the division because they haven't won a division in the Atlantic Division. So they're going to get that feather in their cap, assuming they get one more point. And for their troubles, they get a rival, right? Is this a different sort of series than the point gap between the teams?
I think so, but I also think that so Toronto was here a couple weeks ago and they asked us, this was back when it was a 1 point, Florida and Toronto were flip-flopping. And I said, Toronto's going to end up winning this thing because they need to. Tampa Bay and Florida really don't care. But Toronto definitely needs that, not the banner, and they're not going to put up a banner in Toronto for the Atlantic Division. But those guys need something. They needed that home ice. I think this is a very strong Toronto team. I really like these Maple Leafs. I don't think, everybody's like, oh, Florida should try and play Toronto. that doesn't guarantee anything. But I do think that Ottawa offers them a matchup problem. Yeah, there's quite a big point gap between Ottawa and Toronto. But Toronto's playing. I mean, Ottawa's playing some pretty good hockey right now. So I wouldn't sleep on the Sens, especially in a highly charged matchup like that. Although, we've been to Ottawa, we've seen Toronto games there. It could be a home game for the Leafs in Ottawa.
Yeah, you never know, especially in that first round. Well,
They're going to pay for the tickets. So
yeah, they are.
Yeah,
we appreciate you coming on and breaking it all down. And where can people read your work, and where can people find you today?
Come on over to FloridaHockeyNow.com. I cover the Panthers for NHL.com.
Yep.
What's the Twitters? At George Richards. Come on over, say hello.
The
Florida Hockey Now, YouTube. Florida Hockey Now.
Everywhere.
YouTube
You're everywhere.
channel. Yeah, we got a bunch of stuff over. And I will see you guys, right?
Yeah.
We will see you guys this weekend.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll have you
coming across the alley, baby.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know if I'm invited to the booth, I'll come in.
Always invited, George. Always invited. All right, sir. We appreciate you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. All right. George Richards joining us there.
He's warming up the car for the trip across the state.
He was. Did you see that?
I don't know if he let the cat out of the bag there saying, see you Sunday or whatever. See you this weekend. Game 1 on Sunday. That is not confirmed yet. We don't even know that the Lightning are playing the Panthers yet, even though
we've already made that decision. It's in the bag. It's in the bag.
Maybe George has some information that we don't. We're usually the last to find out.
We are. But that was good information at the beginning about the Ekblad, which,
yes,
I mean,
I didn't know about that. So that's freed up some space for them to basically load manage, which is the other thing he said. It's like Bennett maybe a little bit, but these other guys, Verhaeghe, Forsling, Reinhart, like they just gave him the game off. So I had heard what he said, echoing what Paul Maurice said about how they were playing during that losing streak, where Paul Maurice was like, I really like how we're playing. We're just not getting results. But what does that mean once the playoffs begin? Who knows?
It's kind of like the Lightning in January a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? They were playing pretty well and couldn't score.
Yeah.
So, I think when you're a team that wins too, when you win a cup, I think there's a certain level of comfort that you don't overreact when things start to maybe go down a little bit, because you feel like you're going to correct it. And you have enough guys there who, when things are going to start really hitting the fan, they'll be there.
Yeah.
They'll be there. Now, one of those guys that usually is there is Tkachuk.
Right.
If he's not there,
the heart and the mind might be willing, but if the body is not fully recovered, by fully recovered, he may be recovered, but I mean, you're trying to press on the gas and you've been sitting in the garage for a couple of months, right?
Yep.
So
now look, on one hand,
we'll see how that looks.
On one hand, the rest of his body may feel great.
Yeah.
Having that time off, it may take him a few games, maybe a few practices to get the lungs back to where they need to be. But unless there's a tear somewhere or something that really is going to need multiple months to recover, the rest of his body should feel okay. And the way he kind of plays, maybe that helps. Although if you have a groin injury, that does limit you. So we have to, I think, wait and see what his effectiveness will be. It'll be interesting to see how Marchand is going to have an impact come playoff time.
Yeah.
Because he was a guy that, I mean, obviously that was a little bit of a shock to everybody involved that he was dealt from Boston. You always felt like Marchand was going to be a lifer there. And when they decided to make the trade, I mean, I think Marchand still has a lot of good hockey in him. He could be a guy that in the playoffs, particularly in that first round against Tampa Bay, that would be an interesting X factor for them, especially if Tkachuk can't go.
I'm looking at his games played. He's been in the high teens basically every game. The low end, like 15 and change. The high end, 19 and change. He has a goal and 2 assists in 9 games. So I'd say he's slotted in.
Yeah, and look, he's somebody is going to be ready to go, especially against Lightning in the first round. So it's just going to add to the theater. And then you factor in a guy like Sam Bennett, who I think more than any player outside of Tkachuk and maybe their D-core I mean, that guy makes an impact. You just have to be aware of where that guy is on the ice.
Yeah, for sure.
You just have to. And so how the Lightning are able to handle a big body like that, but also Marchand's chippiness and ability to make plays, especially on the PK, if that's a role he's going to fill, he can be really dangerous for them. So I'm curious how Lightning fans are feeling about potentially, I'll use the word potentially, this matchup in the first round. And are they looking at things differently now than they did, even a couple of weeks ago when, first place looked maybe a little bit more attainable? I mean, the Lightning, the problem is they're just running out of games in the regular season, I think, to make this
those overtime losses to Toronto and Detroit, which I'm not arguing the Lightning deserved more than what they got, but had those results flipped, particularly the one against Toronto, things would look a little different. But I think Toronto would still have the inside track. The Leafs have taken care of business. They really have. I mean,
credit to them.
They get this division title. The last 3 weeks of the regular season, they have played the most consistent hockey in terms of getting points of the three teams. So it means that they get first place if they get one more point, and they're going to play Ottawa. I think George is like, Toronto's going to win the series. That is,
he said, right?
So I'm not saying Toronto isn't going to win the series. What I am looking at, I'm looking at a couple of things. First of all, it is a heated rivalry that transcends where the teams are in the standings. Even when Toronto was making the playoffs every year and Ottawa was missing the playoffs every year over the last 5 or 6, they play very competitive games against one another. The other part is that Toronto is going to come in with all of the pressure. All of the pressure. I mean, even more than what they normally have. I think the last time they were in a series like this was the year of 2021 when they played Montreal in the first round, and Montreal upset them. They couldn't get that fourth win. Remember? They lost 2 games in overtime, and then they lost game 7 at home. If this series gets extended, again, all of the pressure is going to be on Toronto. So winning a series like that may help them, actually, but they're gonna have to navigate some challenges in the series. Odds are they're going to be able to do it, but we'll see. Also, Ottawa's going to try and punish their top guys.
That's going to happen.
Brady Tkachuk is going to be looking to dole out punishment.
He can't wait to get going.
Yeah, he can't wait to get going.
He wants to hit somebody right now.
Right.
That's almost.
And I mean, like, we had that fan asking after the Lightning played the Leafs, like, why did the Lightning have trouble with, heavy teams? I'm like, Toronto is not really a heavy team. Matthews is a strong player, but they are more of they have a little more lightning in them than Panthers, honestly. And Brady Tkachuk is going to look to hammer the top guys on Toronto. I'm mentioning him, but it's not only him. They're going to play that way. They're going to play in your face.
They're going to follow his lead.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do. They're going to follow his lead. And, partner, I will say this about playoff hockey. It even takes the teams who aren't very physical. They become physical. It really is a fascinating development. I can remember, I want to say it was the year that Lemieux came back his second time. And I want to say it was the year that they ended up losing to the Devils in the conference finals. But they had that really tremendous series with the Sabres that went 7 games. Kasparaitis scores. It was like, wait. But I remember they brought Kevin Stevens back, like the second time around. And Stevens at that point was a 3rd or 4th liner. But I can remember, like, the Penguins weren't a physical team at all. And first game watching, I mean, guys were just flying, hitting each other left and right. Got Joseph Baranek. You remember that name? Blast from I mean, guys who you don't see hit all of a sudden started taking the body. And I'm just giving you a specific example. You can make that case for every team, I think, once the playoffs begin, because I think there's a certain expectation. You better sacrifice your body and you better be physical.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see that. And you're right about Tkachuk. He's going to lead the way, but players I would suspect who aren't very physical, I think they're going to be throwing
Right.
their bodies around because you
may be right. I don't think
demands
Ottawa is necessarily a team like that. I mean, Sanderson and Stutzla's a really good player. I'm not sure that he is a sandpaper player, though. Batherson is a skill guy. Giroux is certainly a skill guy. Dylan Cousins is a skill guy. But they may follow Brady's lead.
May follow. Like, if they can finish their check, then maybe they don't do it in the regular season, but maybe in the playoffs, it's like, you got to. Because you know what? If you don't, somebody else is going to hit you.
Right.
So just be ready. Just be ready.
How will Toronto, and I know we're handicapping this like the Leafs are getting first, but the strength of the Ottawa game is in transition.
Mm-hmm.
Are the Leafs going to manage the puck? And are the Senators going to catch them in transition? It's going to be a heavy lift for the Toronto defensemen.
Which means it's going to put more pressure on
because they're going to be facing rush attacks.
Yes.
How do you handle a 3-on-2, right?
What
a 3-on-2 probably shouldn't lead to a grade A chance, but Ottawa can make plays off the rush.
Well, there's two things on that. What's fueling the 3-on-2? There's probably more onus on the Maple Leafs' best players to, if you see a cross ice pass, probably don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Be a little safer. I'm not saying that's part of their game, but look, part of being a leader is also knowing if I don't have a play, I'm not throwing the puck blindly in the middle of the ice in transition.
Yeah.
Dump it in. The second part to that is if you do have the 3-on-2, can your goaltender come up big in those moments and make those saves?
And that is the other part of the series, which is very interesting if it's Leafs Sens. So at one end, you have Ullmark. The Senators are very happy to get Ullmark. He's played very well for them.
Yep.
But he has some demons he needs to exercise, specifically the series against the Panthers when the Bruins were up 3-1 and lost. And he had his fingerprints all over that. And last year, it was really Swayman's net. It wasn't Ullmark's net. So Ullmark has some demons to exercise, but he has a lot more because the other guys don't. Right. A lot more playoff experience than Stolarz or Woll, presumably Stolarz.
Yeah.
So at the one end, you're going to have a goalie. Both goalies are going to have to adopt the show me. Stolarz is going to have to show everyone that he can handle the pressure cooker of playing in the playoffs, and Ullmark is going to have to show that he's beyond what happened in 2023 with the Bruins.
Correct. I think that's fair. Let's go to the emails here, partner. Gavin on YouTube. This was from yesterday. Huge fan of the show. Mishkin is the GOAT. For the playoffs, we need vintage Vasilevsky. And I'd like to see Hagel score before the regular season ends. Been a minute for him.
Has it? I can look up when his last goal was.
When was his last goal?
He's having a great year. It's up to 90 points. He had 3 assists the other night against Buffalo. Hagel has not scored since the game at the Rangers. Was that an empty netter that he got? Maybe against a goalie in the net. He's got 35 goals.
What's the one where he was falling and he scored on his backhand?
Well, he's done that a few times.
The most recent one? I feel like there's been a...
I'm going to look at it. So that was just his bio. Let me look up his game by game.
By the way,
I mean, clearly, maybe it has been a minute because I'm having a hard time remembering. So, yeah, all right. So he's got 2 goals in his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. The other goal he scored was at Ottawa. But he's been chipping in assists. He's got 7 assists in the last 3 games. And he's had some shorthanded looks.
Yeah.
But thank you for the comment. Appreciate it.
By the way, who had Brandon Hagel getting 90 points when he was first acquired?
Nobody.
I mean, partner, it's one thing to say, and you called it, that he's a good player. He's a 20-goal scorer. Why do I know that? Because I've seen it. It's another thing to say this guy's got, approaching 95 points.
Yeah.
95. I mean, guy has 90 points. When we talk about, I hope people hear this because I think it makes some arguments a little bit more impactful. I have said, the Ben Bishop acquisition was one of the most impactful in franchise history.
Mm-hmm.
based off of who you traded to get Bishop's play, his development with Vasilevsky, and then you trade him for Eric Chernak, who ends up being a top 4 defenseman. So it's like the gift that keeps on giving with Ben Bishop to a degree. I'm starting to rethink the Brandon Hagel trade may go down as the best trade we've ever seen in Lightning history. I mean, it's one thing to give up some players who are NHL ready, and the Lightning did that to an extent with Chicago and the players they gave up. But Brandon Hagel has turned himself into, I mean, is it fair to say a dynamic player in the NHL? One that was on Team Canada, the Four Nations tournament. One who is a integral part to this Lightning team and will be for years to come because of his age and the fact that there's probably room for him to grow as a player. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing something. You can make the case, Vasilevsky's draft pick was, getting that pick and getting him. Okay, I'm with you on that. Getting Cooch in the second round.
They didn't know they were getting Vasilevsky, though, when they acquired the pick.
That's true.
They knew that they wanted Brandon Hagel.
True. I mean, honestly, where does that fit?
Here's one way of looking at it, Greg. And I'm not only going to use Hagel's draft year. So he's a 98 birthday. So he was 2016 draft. Let's say a range. I'm not going to say recent because the players that were drafted in the last couple of years are not as far along as Hagel is in his professional development in his career. But let's say a range of maybe 2015 draft to 2020 draft. Look at the top 10 picks in those years. Say 6 years, 2015 through 2020, including 15 and 20. That's 6 years. Look at the top 10 players taken in those 6 drafts. Now, you got some generational players in there. I understand McDavid, Matthews, and all that. But just the top 10. How many of those top 10 picks over those 6 years, 60 players, how many of those players are not as impactful as Brandon Hagel is right now in the NHL? Basically, what I'm kind of advancing is the theory that Brandon Hagel essentially for the Lightning is like a top 10 pick. Because it's not like they got him when he was 29. I mean, they got him when he was 24 years old.
Incredible.
Like they got him as he was kind of coming out of his development stage and just like blossoming into an NHL player. I mean, it's hard to argue that there are many players around the league more valuable to their teams than Brandon Hagel is to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So when people are like, well, the Lightning don't have any draft picks historically in the last decade because they've traded them away. Okay, but Brandon Hagel has turned into a player who, in my opinion, is just as valuable as a top 10 pick.
What's beautiful about the Lightning, too, and I think they've started to turn the corner in this because we've seen some of the younger players start to come up, is the fact that if you don't have those prospects in your system and you're a little light because you've been trading so many over the years, it's okay to use the other team to develop the players.
Yeah.
Get those players in a trade. And you and I
You're going to pay for those. You're going to pay for that, which the Lightning did. I mean, they gave up 2 players off their NHL roster plus 2 draft picks, first round draft picks.
Even if you had half the success Hagel had, I think for the Lightning with where they are right now, you would take those trades because you have a guy ready to go who's going to be productive. Nick Paul's the same thing. Nick Paul hasn't had as big of an impact that Hagel's had, partner, but Nick Paul has been a key cog in this team since he's been acquired. And I think it's safe to say he has taken his game, especially offensively, to another level since he's been a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
And so that was a straight 1-for-1. Unless I'm mistaken, it was Paul for Joseph. So
would you make that deal 100 times?
Matthew Joseph? Is Matthew Joseph still with the Ottawa Senators? No. Right.
In fact, I don't think Kachuk or Radish are still with Chicago. In fact, I think Boris Kachuk is with the Penguins organization.
Yeah,
and whereas Radish is with the Capitals.
Radish is in Washington. Yeah.
And okay, so he's at least found a little bit of a home in the NHL. I'm not going to say with a specific team because I think he's bounced a little bit, and I think he's turned himself into at least a NHL player.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a difference between an NHL player and one who's making an impact.
Yeah.
Night in and night out. And Brandon Hagel has done that. I'd be curious if there's any other trades out there off the top of our audience's heads that they would look at and say, that's comparable.
Mm-hmm.
That's comparable because it's hard to come up with it. A couple of other questions here. This one comes from Glenn. This was just a few minutes ago. As a Western Michigan University grad, I'd like to say congrats to WMU D1 hockey team for their first national championship. 2 questions. First, for Dave, are there any nonverbal cues you and Phil use during game broadcasts? Second, why oh why do they play Living on a Prayer as the goal song in a 6-2 pounding? Thanks to all the great work on a fantastic and entertaining show.
So there are no cues between Phil and me. We've just worked together so long.
You don't need to know. I mean, you know what Phil is.
Yeah. I mean, Phil emotes. I emote, but Phil emotes. That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when there's a whistle, I try and get out quickly, and then Phil jumps in.
Yeah.
He actually, probably less so than most analysts, he does not try and get any words in while play is going on.
He doesn't. I think that's something you probably appreciate.
Just let the play-by. He said that to me when we first met. He's like, you're in the driver's seat. Do the play-by-play. I don't really know. I think players pick a goal song, don't they?
I think they do.
I know that they've done that in the past, so I don't know. They don't. Steve's saying no. Because I remember Hedman had that song,
Swedish,
right? Yeah.
His buddy,
I don't know why they played Living on a Prayer.
Well, wasn't Tyler
I actually
Johnson?
don't even really hear the music after a goal because we're talking.
Yeah,
so
right. What was Johnny?
Do you have any comments on that, Steve? Or talk to Friendzone. Yeah.
Talk to Friendzone. By the way, I think the in-game entertainment with John Friendzone, what they've done this year with the goofy faces, and like the kiss cam has been tremendous. They haven't done the cowboy guy. They haven't focused on him as much.
No, they should do the cowboy guy with the funky face. People who haven't been to a game
Actually,
don't know what we're talking about.
They should. But the in-game entertainment, I feel like has, for whatever reason, it feels like it's been even better this year, and it's always been fantastic. But
well, now they've fallen in love with, and am I doing a plug here that I shouldn't? The Wendy's Frosty.
Yeah, that's funny.
It's the mascot. Is it the mascot or is it just
the mascot?
Okay, it's a milkshake, right? So, but it's like stepping out with a smile. It was in the dance off, wasn't it?
That is true.
If your milkshake dances, does that make the milkshake smoother and creamier? It's like shaking it up some more.
And Phil, of course, loves the kiss cam, correct?
He loves the kiss cam.
That's his favorite part.
And then we had an engagement at the end of the kiss cam. It wasn't the last game because Coburn sat in.
Was anybody else, like, when that happens, and usually I don't care, but was anybody happening like, I hope she says yes?
Yeah, but I said I hope he bought his ring at Ackerman Jewelers because they're sponsoring
That's right.
They're sponsoring the kiss cam.
Oh, man, I tell you what,
we're having too much fun. I will say this: so one of the many great workers for the Lightning Vision, Felicia.
Yeah,
she's been celebrated on some videos where she's in the control room. You maybe have seen them.
Yeah.
So Felicia was at the game, like spectating, and they were, I'll say in a fun way, picking on her. Like they did that funky face thing and they kept going back to her. And she was like, cut it. And I could tell someone's going to be in big trouble when she gets back into that control room.
True. She's like, stop.
Yeah. She was laughing, but she was like, okay, 30 seconds on me is too much.
That did feel like an eternity, by the way.
Yeah.
It felt like that was on for 5 minutes, and I'm sure it felt longer for her, but it's always great fun. I always enjoy it. Lucas says, I'm hoping cooler heads prevail tonight and the Bolts don't get dragged into extra post whistle shenanigans. Getting out of this game 100% healthy should be way more important than a win.
Yeah, I agree with
disagree.
you. I mean, look, games take on a life of their own. I did see the Kings and Oilers in that game where the Oilers didn't dress a bunch of guys. Like the Kings won decisively 5-0, but there were some fisticuffs in there. We'll see.
I'm looking through more. Anthony says, no surprise, but Florida is the most dump and chase team in the league. They're dump 50% of pucks and retrieve, but about 35% of them. Leafs are second. Today is just a cruise along game, and we don't see most matchups, but the key one for me is Cooch versus Forsling.
Forsling is their best defenseman. He is. I mean, he's their best defensive defenseman. He's also, in my opinion, their best overall defenseman.
Yeah,
and he will be out as much as Paul Maurice can get him out against the point line with Kucherov. I don't know how much we're going to, and Kucherov plays right wing and Forsling is the left D. So the fan is correct that is kind of a head to head. And some of what's going to happen in the series, presuming the series happens, some of what is going to unfold in the series, depending on who comes out on top, is going to be tied to that specific matchup. Right. Also, McDonough Chernak against the Barkov line. So George was talking about Bennett, Bennett and who's going to play with on the Bennett line. The top line, though, assuming it's still the top line, is Barkov, Reinhart, and Verhaeghe. Now, sometimes it mixes up a little bit, gets shifted. But Barkov's line, how will the Lightning handle that matchup? What else did he have in there besides the Kucherov Forsling?
He got into some stats about
the dump and chase.
Florida's most dump and chase team.
Yeah.
They're dump 50% of pucks and retrieve about 35% of them.
So what that says to me is after Barkov's line and after Bennett's line, the third and fourth lines, although Lundell will carry it in too. Basically, if you are more of a meat and potatoes line, you're dumping it in. I think most teams are that way, though. But I will tell you, Barkov carries it in more than he dumps it in. He does. And I have this image of Bennett weaving through the neutral zone, carrying it across the blue line. So I think that their top two centers, I don't know what the breakdown is, but I would say more than 50% of the time they are carrying it in rather than dumping it in. What he's saying is when they dump it in, they get the puck 35% of the time, which I don't know how that ranks as compared to other teams. But if you figure the defenseman actually has a closer lane to the puck, 35% isn't bad. And what does that mean? Does that mean that the attacking player gets to the puck first, or the attacking player is taking the puck away? The defending player gets to it first, but is checked and loses it. I don't know. I don't know how to interpret those numbers, but look, the bottom line is if you have a high skill player, that player wants to carry it in. I mean, Austin Matthews is not dumping the puck in if he has a chance to carry it in. William Nylander is not dumping the puck in if he has a chance to carry it in. John Tavares is not dumping the puck in if he has a chance to carry it in. That's what high skill players do.
Yeah, Lightning have a laundry list of those players too.
Yeah.
For sure. Forsling.
Talk about a great pickup. Did they get him on waivers?
They did.
I can't remember if it was waivers. It was waivers. Yeah. Unbelievable.
I mean, is he like the Ryan McDonough of his era right now at this point? Like Ryan McDonough is still playing at a high level.
Yeah.
When you talk about defensive defensemen, right? Is he the guy right now?
He's one of the best in the league for sure.
I mean, who would you take over that guy? I mean, I'm sure you could make an argument, but if you said you're going to get Forsling on that back end, and then you can build around him a little bit, I think you'd be like, okay.
I think there are other candidates. I mean, I really like Slavin.
Yeah,
Vegas has a bunch. Hannafin is terrific. Theodore is terrific. Theodore probably has a little more offensive upside.
Got a big shot.
Yeah, but he's really, really good defensively too. So they're not alone, but how many of those guys, as we've said frequently over the last couple of weeks, how many of those guys get votes for the Norris?
None.
Maybe Theodore, maybe.
I'm exaggerating, but I mean, yeah. Why isn't Forsling getting them right now?
You know who's a sneaky good player in that regard, who's going to be missed terribly in the first round, is Ekholm for Edmonton.
He's a good player.
Ekholm transformed the way Edmonton defends when they got him.
He's cheap. He's nasty. Plays with snarl. I mean, he's cheap.
But he's a really solid player, and he will get those matchups, and he's out for the first round for Edmonton.
No doubt.
There are other players out there. Beyond, then you have the category of the Quinn Hughes and the Cale Makars and the Adam Foxes, like the very, really dynamic offensive defenseman who can skate. Yossi, I mean, I think we can still, even though Nashville's had a terrible year, Yossi falls into that category, and he has won the Norris Trophy before. But this category that we're talking about is a little different, where it's like lockdown defensemen who get the toughest assignments, can chip in offensively, and usually are way up there in plus minus, even as they're getting the hardest assignments.
They don't get the credit that they deserve that part of the NHL, those defensive defensemen. But I think it's hopefully us talking about these things and other people talking about these things bring light to some of those players who are.
I'm just
really
getting, and plus minus, Greg, understand, like, it doesn't tell you everything, but I just did a filter: defenseman, top plus minus players in the NHL to this point this year. Defenseman, number 1, Ryan McDonough, plus 44. Number 2, Braden McNabb. I didn't even mention him on Vegas. I mentioned the other 2 lefties, Theodore and Hannafin, but McNabb is plus 40. Essa Lindell, Dallas has got a good team. He's plus 35. Dylan Sandberg, I've heard his name mentioned as a guy who's really elevated for Winnipeg. They've had a great year. Plus 33. Forsling is there. Thomas Harley with Dallas. Dylan DeMello with Winnipeg. Chernak is there. Devon Taves. So I'm going to use this comparison. It's not the right comparison, but Devon Taves to Cale Makar is like Ruda to Hedman.
Right.
Devon Taves fits really well with Cale Makar, in addition to being a really solid defenseman. He's got 10 goals this year, too. Tanev, we talked about him, plus 28 with Toronto. Gavrikov, remember I mentioned him with the Kings. Really, really solid player. Lightning saw him when he was at the beginning of his career with Columbus, when the teams met in the playoffs. I think he has, like, his star has skyrocketed since he got to LA. He's a really, really good player. So I just gave you a bunch there.
You did.
Yeah.
More notoriety, I think, for some of these guys. At least I know it's not a flashy job, but it's one that I think needs recognized. TB Sports Fan says, guys, have you heard anything new on Isaac Howard? Wondering if they revisit it now that Bjorkstrand is expected to miss some time, still unsure what's happening with the whole situation.
I don't think anything's happening with the situation, but if it is, we haven't heard about it.
No, it has been. Is it fair to say that's been the biggest talking point the last 2 months for Tampa Bay fans, I think, in addition to.
Well, they got excited because this guy, I mean, he turned out to win the Hobie Baker Award. So congratulations to him. He had a great year. But I mean, I don't know how much we can read into these reports. At some point, maybe the full story will come out. And by full story, I'm saying we hear the story from both sides, right? Because Howard was kind of cryptic. He's like, yeah, we just didn't see eye to eye or whatever. Well, what does that mean exactly? Is it related to the contracts? Is it related to where he was playing? Who knows? What I will say is this. The Lightning as a management group have earned the benefit of the doubt. That's how I come down on it. So I don't know what happened with the negotiations, but I think based on what the Lightning have done, they haven't hit everyone out of the park, and they haven't even connected on every one of their decisions. They've missed on some draft picks. They've missed on some free agents, but they've gotten a lot right. I mean, we just spent a bunch of time talking about Hagel, right? They've gotten a lot right. So if you're a Lightning fan, you may be upset that things have transpired the way that they transpired. And as I've said, like, the chapter is not closed on this yet. The Lightning still hold his rights until next August, as in August a year from now.
Right.
But I would say, at least for me, Julian Brisebois and company, they've earned the benefit of the doubt in this case, where whatever it was that prohibited them from working out the deal, they had their reasons.
Makes some sense. And we will keep you abreast of the whole situation, partner. We've got the game tonight, 7:30, right? Not 7.
7:30 with ESPN televising the game.
Can't wait for that. That'll be a 7 o'clock pregame. And then you and I will be back at it again tomorrow. We're going to
pre-taping tomorrow because it's a departure day.
So get your questions in. We'll get to more of them tomorrow for the show. And I will see you at the rink.
See you at the rink.
Thanks to all involved who participated in the show, including George Richards. Always appreciate having somebody come on to talk about the opposing team. Thanks to Steve Ersnick and Jared Johnston. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.